What's going on, everybody? Welcome to my review of Gladiator 2. And you might be wondering, why do I have a Germanic shield and an African sword to represent a video that I'm doing about the Roman Colosseum? Well, because, just like this movie, there's not much that's very accurate, we can say. But for a moment, let's be honest with ourselves. If any of us understand the fact that Ridley Scott is not a historically accurate historical movie maker, for example, for those of us that study history, everybody knows that the first Gladiator is completely fiction. That guy never existed. I know he has a lot of cool quotes. He's very memorable. Great leader for a fiction historical movie. However, he never existed. Maximus Decimus Aurelius never actually existed. So the fact that so many people are getting worked up about the historical authenticity about Gladiator 2 is honestly just, I truly marvel. I'm surprised at the extreme hatred for the historical inaccuracy of this film when the first Gladiator itself is not historically accurate. Neither are any of Ridley Scott's historical movies. So don't know what people were expecting. I went into this movie not holding it to that standard because I already knew it wasn't going to live up to it. I knew in terms of historical accuracy, it's just not going to be there. And I'll make plenty of videos following this up, talking more about some of the things that I would have liked to touch on in terms of historical authenticity. And yeah, we'll get around to that in some other videos. But for this video, I just want to focus on, is this movie entertaining? Is it a good movie? Is it a fun watch? Is it worth going to the movie theater? That's what I want to focus on. So firstly, with that being said, I would just like to say that for the most part, I will admit that I was fairly entertained in this movie. And it doesn't mean that it's a good movie at all. Now, do I think that it's watchable? Do I think that it's fun to watch in the theater? Sure, yeah. I think some of the spectacles, some of the grandiose battles and things like that, it's entertaining to watch. However, of course, my historical brain was constantly like bashing, trying to break my programming to not enjoy the movie. And I think that if I would have watched that movie with that sense of trying to nitpick everything that's historically inaccurate, I definitely would not have enjoyed this movie at all. But thankfully, I just went into it, not expecting much, and I had some moments in the movie that were pretty entertaining to me. Now, pound for pound, is it something that competes or is as good as the original Gladiator? No. I would not say that it's as good as the original Gladiator. As a matter of fact, this movie is pretty much almost like a remake of the original Gladiator in a lot of ways. However, the end is completely different because, of course, this ending is even more historically inaccurate than anything about the first movie. The first movie could have been some alternative little history, missed history part. You know what I'm saying? Like something that could have happened, but there's no evidence for, so it just didn't happen, of course. But this movie takes it to like complete alternate timeline history, right? The ending of this movie is complete alternate timeline history. So it really just depends what you went into this movie expecting as to what it is that you'll get out of it. So for me, as I've iterated already enough, I was entertained throughout most parts of the movie. There are a lot of parts of the movie that tend to drag toward the end. I think there's a lot of dialogue, a lot of stuff near the end, and I'm just like, okay, it's time to wrap it up. I'm ready to go. But in terms of the set design, I guess the immersion of it all, right? The immersion of this world, which is not accurate, but nonetheless, I mean, it is a fictional world that is being entered into as an audience member, as a movie watcher. And I felt like it was pretty immersive. There wasn't no huge emergent breaks or anything like that. And also another thing I liked was a lot of the costuming. I thought was done very well. In particular, I like Denzel Washington's outfits. I felt like they were very elaborate, very stylish, of course. And I think overall the costume department did a pretty good job. Of course, it's not, again, I keep saying it. I'm sorry, but I keep saying it. It's not accurate, but it looks good. It looks cool. It looks like, they put a little effort into creating whatever it is, this heavily grandiose, romanticized, extreme version of what would be Roman times. Now, in terms of some of the plot and some of the writing, I was not a huge fan of some of it throughout the movie. I felt like the first movie had very memorable speeches and quotes. This movie doesn't really have that kind of impact. This movie doesn't really have that kind of impact in terms of the dialogue, so it's definitely a step down from the first one in that sense. Some of the plot points were kind of trash to me. I mean, first of all, like the fact that the beginning of the movie starts the way it does, and the main character's motivation is entirely based upon this revenge for his loved one who was killed in the beginning, and it's just, I don't know. I didn't feel the weight of it because we barely even knew that character. We barely even saw anything about that character, so it just kind of fell flat, and then it kind of transformed into something else. He realizes, or doesn't realize, he knows who he is, but he kind of comes into the person that he was, connected to people from the first movie and all that. And I know I'm sounding very cryptic now. I'm trying to keep it spoiler free because I don't want to discourage anyone from wanting to go see it if they wanted to go see it. However, of course, my review and others' reviews will also probably play a part in some people going to see it. But for those that are going to go watch the movie, I don't want to necessarily ruin anything, so I'm just trying to keep it a little cryptic, but also not too much to the point where I sound completely insane. But moving forward, going with the casting, I just want to say too, I was not a big fan of neither the plot or the casting of the dual emperors, of the twin emperors, air quotes twin emperors for my historical people. Y'all know why it's air quote twin, because there was no twins. But I do not like the casting or the plot of Caracalla and Gaeta as the dual emperors. I thought it strayed extremely far from the history. This was something I couldn't ignore, is how big it was. That I just couldn't ignore the grand departure from the actual Caracalla and Gaeta, and their relationship in real life is very, very different from how they are in this movie. Even their depictions are very, very different. I mean, of course, we don't know much about Gaeta, but in terms of Caracalla, very, very different, abruptly different from Caracalla in real life. So I was not a big fan of that. Now, I know there was controversy around Denzel Washington and all that being in the movie. I don't know why there's controversy, but actually I do. But I'll touch upon that in another video and kind of touch on some points dealing with certain things around that same topic, dealing with this movie and other movies for that matter. In terms of the lead actor, Paul Mescal and Pedro Pascal, Pedro Pascal did fine. I thought he was good as his little arc of redemption, sort of. I don't know, but I thought he was okay. Also, I know a lot of people were not a huge fan of Paul Mescal being the lead in this movie, but I thought he did fine as the lead. I thought that he was easy to follow throughout the movie. I didn't think that he did like a horrendous job or that he couldn't lead any movie. I thought he was fine. He just looks like kind of swoller Mediterranean kind of Harry Potter, Daniel Radcliffe. I don't know, but yeah, the action in the movie was pretty solid. Not as gory, not as good as the first movie. And I think a lot of it had to do with the practical effects, man. I really miss practical effects, and I feel like this movie could have had a lot more practical effects. Of course, though, they want to do this big, grandiose, grandiose, giant battles and crazy stuff happening and all this stuff. So, of course, they wanted to interject some CGI, and it doesn't ruin the movie, but just the violence of the first movie, the practicality of it all, even the chariot cutting off people's legs and stuff like that, it just takes it to another level. And this movie didn't have that essence that you get from practical effects. So, it's negative in that aspect too. Now, moving towards my final verdicts. As you can tell from this review, as you can probably tell from this review, I did enjoy some things about the movie, but I also couldn't help but knock some things down due to just the lack of practical effects and also just some decisions dealing with the plot and some characters that I really didn't like, as well as the fact that this movie is basically just another Gladiator, but not in a good way, not in the best way that it could have been. It could have been a proper sequel. It could have taken things in a different direction. It could have done something just a little bit different so you don't feel too much like the first movie. Except, of course, the first movie just did it better, in my opinion. But, so for a final verdict, I'm going to give the movie two final verdicts, as I have done in my previous reviews of other movies. And starting off with my historical authenticity review score, we're going to do this out of 10. And for historical authenticity, I'll give the movie a 3 or 2. 2.5. Let's give it 2.5 for historical authenticity. This movie is not historically accurate at all. I wouldn't recommend anyone base their knowledge of Roman history, Mediterranean history, anything about that with this movie. This movie is not historically accurate, not whatsoever. But neither is the first one. And honestly, I'd give the first movie a pretty low historical accuracy rating too. So, that doesn't say too much. But in terms of entertainment, just regular movie watching, I think this movie, I'd give it probably a 6.5 out of 10. I think that's a very fair judgment given the fact that this movie does fall short in a lot of areas. However, I can say that I was fairly entertained. Not fully entertained, but fairly entertained. So it is a slightly above average in terms of enjoyment. So I would say that if you're okay with that, go ahead, give it a shot. See what you like about it, see what you don't like about it. Obviously, not everybody is this deep into history and knows all these things like a lot of us that are really into history. So, of course, I'm not expecting everybody to feel the same way as I do. But I think a lot of people that do care about history and do study history for real, not just people that, post hate comments and troll and all this stuff, people that actually like history, I think you're going to be disappointed in a lot of things. But if you go into it, just turn your mind off, watch a fiction movie. It's an okay movie. It's not the worst movie ever. So anyways, let me know what you guys think. Go ahead, leave a comment below, like, share, subscribe, all that good stuff. See you guys on the next one. Keep tapping into your roots. Ashe.